Hi, everybody. This is Kim from It Again Bookstore, and today we are with the authors of the Overnight Code. That's Raye Montague and Paige Bowers. Hey, guys.
Hey, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. I was telling them earlier, I love this book. I read it in one sitting, start to go, did not stop. I think I went to the bathroom a couple times, but that's it. And I was just like obsessed, and I would stop and I would give my kids and my husband updates. I'm like, okay, this is what's happening now. It was so good. And honestly, I am going to recommend it to like every kid who comes into the store. It's like, if they need a biography, this is it. So, and we already got some comments. Okay, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll talk about the book?
Okay. I have been a freelance journalist for at least 20 years, and I have made a big, a lot of it has been spent writing about people, anyone from any walk of life, from just everyday people to fashion designers to athletes and all, just you name it. I went to graduate school. I got a master's degree later in life to study at LSU, where I studied European history. My first book was The General's Niece, the little known de Gaulle, who fought to free occupied France. And here we are with my second book with David. It's a collaboration, and it's really been a joy to do. So I'm a writer. And as I was saying before we went live, I'm a cook, I'm a mom, I'm a dog mom, and as you saw from one of the comments there, I'm a Tiger fan.
Yeah. He was telling me where to get the best andouille sausage, and it's not at our local Publix.
No, it's not.
Also, we've been talking for 15 minutes before we've gone live, and I found out, let's see, David's dog, his name is Ethan, and Paige has a 6-year-old lab.
Yeah, Murray.
Yeah. Murray.
Yeah.
Murray and Ethan. So, and then I've got my Fiona right here. So she's like, why did you touch me? David, who are you?
I'm a guy that is originally from the Washington, D.C. area. I'm the son of Raye Montague. I live in Little Rock, Arkansas now. Professionally, I'm the executive director of online learning and faculty mentoring at University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff.
Well, no wonder you have 3 monitors.
Well, yeah, I'm in charge of online learning. Yeah. So,
oh my goodness.
We were really busy last spring. I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also a senior faculty member in the criminal justice department, but I haven't been really in there about 5 years now. I really love teaching and service. Of course, I love doing research as well. I'm married. I have an amazing person I'm married to named Whitney Montague, and my child Mace, and Riley, and 17 years old. And let's see, I mentioned I like doing service. I do a lot of work in prisons. Let's see, I'm a volunteer police officer reserve in Bryant, Arkansas, which is not too far from Little Rock. School, I went to Morehouse for my undergraduate in political science. I went to George Washington University for my master's in the forensic science department, but it was white collar crime basically, and did my PhD at Howard University in political science. And this is actually my second career. My first career, I was an investigator with the federal government. I did federal investigations for 14 years in various types of capacities, with believe it or not, everything from drugs to assassination and some other things.
Wow.
I've been very fortunate to experience a lot of things, and I think one of the highlights of my life has actually been meeting Paige Bowers, because Paige and I have been 2 peas in a pod, or we call each other Wonder Twins.
Yes.
And if not for her, my mother's desire to actually finally decide to write a book probably would not have come to light. Certainly not in this way.
So I feel like after I read this that I like watched you grow up in the span of like 4 hours. Oh my goodness. Okay. Can you tell who is this book about? Let's talk about her.
So Raye is David's mother. She is, I probably shouldn't have jumped in and I probably should have let him talk about his own mother, but here I go. Raye Montague was the first person to design a naval warship using a computer. She's a hidden figure of the U.S. Navy. And the reason why this feat of designing a warship with a computer was so significant was because it was a process that was largely done by hand. Everything was drawn out to exact measurements. Then you would have to recalculate bits and pieces of what you were drawing every time, you made an adjustment. So if an admiral came down and said, we need to add 2 more sailors to this, you would have to make it a little bit bigger, add a little bit more propulsion. You'd have to redraw it and then recalculate it. So this was something that took a long time, like 2 to 3 years to do, and it cost millions of dollars. When Ms. Montague debugged the code that was used to design what would become the Oliver Hazard Perry frigate, that design happened in 18 hours and 26 minutes, which was a major cost saver for the Navy. But it also allowed the Navy or the United States to remain competitive during the Cold War. So because after World War II, the Russians were far ahead of the U.S. in terms of their shipbuilding and their modernization. And so the U.S. had a lot to do. And his mother played a big part of that. She was also just this tremendous woman who grew up during Jim Crow, overcame a lot of obstacles that were put in her way to be able to do what she accomplished. This was no mean feat.
Like an amazing force of nature.
Yes, she was. She was. And David can speak to that.
Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, David could speak to that.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody asked me not too long ago, what was it like growing up as the child of Raye Montague? And I grew up basically in the Navy. I grew up in visiting off Naval Sea Systems Command in Washington, D.C. I've traveled at the Navy's expense because my father left when I was very, very young, and so my mother raised me as a single parent. Actually, my grandmother actually left Arkansas and moved to D.C. to help her, but essentially, my exposure to what a person she was I got a chance to travel with her all over the United States, various civilian and military facilities, corporate facilities. Got a chance to really, there wasn't see things. And I think what really I learned is she was a real people person. And she learned early on, I think, from her days having to overcome so many different obstacles as, being a Black person, from a girl to a woman, and certainly in times that were even worse in terms of gender discrimination than they are now, which are still bad right now. And then also with the stereotypes of being from the South and negative stereotypes surrounding that. And so I got a chance to see her, learn how to basically, tell people she's playing chess, not checkers, and when people, and if you were doing what you're supposed to do the right way, that's in her personal life or her professional life, you're fine. And she understood people can make mistakes. That happens. Her issue is if you don't put in the effort or you're being careless in what you're doing. And she would then let you have it. She would let you have it. And that's how it was for me growing up. So I got tons of encouragement in my personal life, growing up. She gave tons of encouragement professionally. And I think that's what really caught a lot of people off guard because, they expected her to just pass out assignments but she was mentoring, she was nurturing, she was making sure they had all the resources they need. And she told people that, say, when you do really well at this project and you move on to the next thing and you got other opportunities, it's important to make sure that you are empowering yourself with strong people. You give them the support they need. Don't try to outshine them. We're all a team. We all make it work, and we do it based on everybody's strengths. So I saw a lot. I mean, it's a long answer to the question, but growing up with her, I realized that she just tried to make the very best of every deck of cards or set of hands or a hand of cards that she would get.
Was she the kind of person who really just saw the best in people and was just really upset when they didn't live up to that potential?
Yes. And obviously I'm sure everyone, especially anyone that reads this book, will know that there are a lot of people that either because of just stereotypes and lack of giving her a chance or outright trying to trip her up and make it hard for her to achieve, she never forgot, and she made people know that she didn't forget what people did. However, she never use it as an excuse not to feel like it's important to open doors for other people. And I think it's really important to mention, especially given all the activity last year, social justice and so forth. She didn't care where you were from. She didn't care what you believed in. She didn't care who you loved. She didn't care any of that. What languages, anything. She just cared that you wanted to try to find a goal or set of goals, that you were willing to put in the work, right? And that you were willing to reach out for resources, and that you could have faith in yourself. And that's what she preached to every type of audience, whether it was children, professional groups for their professional development training, even at the Naval Academy, where she would go regularly and talk about hull design to the midshipmen. Or even in the prisons, talking to people who are incarcerated and trying to give them hope.
Yeah, David took me into the prison. I went to Little Rock July 2019 to try to finish up work on the book, research on the book, do some interviews and that sort of thing. And he did take me into the prisons to meet, there's one particular man who was truly touched by her and really, inspired by her. He was a man who was doing life in prison. He was a man who was in the U.S. Navy at one point in his own life, but he had some problems in his life. He wound up in jail for life, and just knowing Raye Montague, just being able to communicate with her and to be encouraged by her to not give up hope and to keep trying, it really made a mark on his life.
I read the intro to this book twice because it was just so moving. And I loved, you said she was respect. Oh my gosh, I wrote it down. Respect the sacrifices made for you and how important that was. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, she thought it was very important to everyone to know their history, even if people don't want to share that history with you. Your obligation to try to find out more about yourself, and then never think that you did anything really on your own. Something played a role, either happenstance or other people, and so she firmly believed that anytime that she would get an opportunity, right? She recognized that she had to put in the work to get it done. Like she used to say, if the door of opportunity opens up, you can't just sit there and say, well, hold that door, I'm going to go pack a bag real quick. He said you used to stick your foot in that door as fast as you can if it looks like a good opportunity and jump on it and then figure it out, right? But it's important to remember that we're all part of something together. And I think that's what she really meant. So for her, it meant even more though, because we're all building on the shoulders of others, that it's so important to give back to other people and instill in them that they have a role to play. So she felt that it's important to have the respect for others that helped her, and then understand that it's so important to give back to others to keep that going.
You use the phrase "reach back" a lot in the book, right?
Yeah.
I'm
gonna share an anecdote from the book. This is a young girl who his mother was someone who didn't play with dolls as a little girl. She played with trucks and she took apart things and put them back together. And so one fall day when she was 7 years old, there was a miniature Japanese submarine that was being taken on tour across the United States to raise money for war bonds. And so her grandfather took her down to see this little submarine. And, you know, he couldn't go in with her, but she remembered dropping down into it and the smell, even in her later years, she remembered the smell of sweat and, you know, gasoline, and then looking around and seeing all these dials and mechanisms and levers. And as a girl that took things apart and put them back together, she looked around at all of this and was really, really transfixed. And she said there was a man in navy whites in the submarine with her, and she was excited. She said, "Wow, what do you need to know to do this?" And he said, "You need to be an engineer, but you don't have to worry about that." And the implication was she's a girl and she's Black, and this door was not going to open for her. But she was not, you know, then and throughout her life, she was not somebody who, she didn't understand what he said first. She didn't take it as an insult, but it became apparent to her later. She walked home with her grandfather and was so excited. She walked into the house. Mm-hmm. She told her mother, Flossie, "I'm going to be an engineer someday. That's it. That's what I'm going to do." And so her mother said, "Raye, you have 3 strikes against you. You're a girl, you're Black, and you have a Southern segregated school education, but you can do and be anything you want to be, provided you have a good education." Mm-hmm. So she did. She grabbed her hand, this hopeful little girl, and she walked her to the local library, and they went in together and they looked up what you needed to learn in order to be an engineer together, and learn math, learn science, have out-of-the-box thinking. So she carried this with her. Unfortunately, at that time, the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville did not permit Black students to study engineering. So this was close to her. So she wound up studying business at a different school, but she, as someone who took things apart and put them back together, she took all these bits of knowledge that she had been assembling and used them in a way, cobbled them together in a way that served her as well as a real conventional engineering degree, if not better. Mm-hmm. And she did that over the course of, you know, the first 21 years of her life, and then continued to build on that, you know, the best way she could. And to me, that's just tremendous. You know, to have that, you know, close to you, but then to say, "I don't really care. I'm going to kick the door open anyway and do what I need to do." Mm-hmm.
Can I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
So, you know, I know one of the things that she used to say, because, you know, I remember her speaking to kids when I was a kid, you know, was very active with the Links, which is a very influential women's group, these tremendous work all over the country, all over the world. And then her sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, that she pledged in 1954, you know, and I've heard her say it to kids when I was a child, and then at different events, but then also even in retirement, speaking to youth groups and church groups and so forth. And I'm kind of paraphrasing, putting it, but the message is always worded just a little bit different. But basically, she would tell people, never make assumptions that just because the calendar year moves forward, mm-hmm. that society always moves forward. And it's important for each individual person to figure out how to level the playing field as best they can, and not assume that they're going to actually have things open up in an easier way than the people before them. And so by that, she meant it is vital for each person to figure out a goal or set of goals, short, long, intermediate, long term, to be able to identify skills that need to be obtained. Make sure that, you know, and everything from just public speaking to, you know, technical writing or professional writing, not learning how to not be shy in front of people at meetings, and knowing, you know, proper etiquette for business, you know, purposes and so forth, and social purposes. And so she would tell these kids in a way that kids would understand, you have to make sure that you're prepared so that you have the right set of skills and you have the right set of, she used the word tools a lot, equipment, to be able to.
He was an engineer.
That's right. To be able to handle whatever comes your way, because you have no way of predicting how things will change in the future or what people are going to throw your way to set you off your goal.
How about we do a reading? Paige,
Okay.
you want to read something for us?
I would love to read something for you. So Raye moved to Washington, D.C. Shortly after she graduated from college. And, immediately started throwing her resume around and got hired by the U.S. Navy. I'm looking for the spot. And started working her way up. She had just a fascinating thing. She learned how to use this huge UNIVAC computer just by watching people. There were no computers like that in the state of Arkansas when she left. But when she was hired, the man who hired her said, "Do you know how to use a computer?" And she said, "Absolutely," which was a bit of a fib. But she got hired as a clerk typist, got promoted shortly after that, started teaching other people how to use this huge UNIVAC computer, and then realized all these men, largely white men, that she was teaching how to use the computer, they were getting promoted and they were getting raises, and she was not. So she asked her boss, whose name is Jack, "What do I need to do to get a promotion too?" And the boss said, "You need to come in and work the late shift." Well, Raye didn't drive at the time, but this is what she went to, just to work the late shift and have the opportunity to get a raise. So I asked Jack whether I could make the same money as the men if I had a car and could come in to work at night, Raye said. He said yes and thought he was done with it, but that evening I went to a used car lot and bought a 1949 Pontiac for $375. I had the salesman drive it to my house, and I volunteered to work the midnight shift for a month. Pardon me. At 10 o'clock every night, Raye would slide behind the wheel of her Pontiac and begin the slow, careful drive out to Carterock from her house. 2 hours later, she would arrive at the office where she'd work until the day shift came in. When the day people arrived, I'd laugh with them and help them get set up for the day, Raye said. They thought I was being kind, but I was waiting for the traffic to let up at 9:30 so I could drive home at no miles an hour. When I got home, I'd have to find a parking space I could just pull into because I didn't know how to park a car. Around the time Raye was crawling to work and back in the car, one of her aunts died, and Raye went home to Little Rock for the burial. Flossie had bought a car in the short time since Raye had been gone, and Raye drove it around town to practice. My mother had a friend who worked at the courthouse, and this friend said, "Raye, I see you're driving your mother's car. Do you have a license?" And I said, "No." So he said, "Do you want one?" And I said, "Yes." A couple hours later, he tossed it over to me because at that time you didn't have to have a picture ID, and I didn't take an exam. When I got back to DC, the Department of Motor Vehicles honored my driver's permit and gave me the DC permit. Pardon me again. I proudly showed off my license at work, and everyone was laughing because nobody thought I had that kind of nerve. Raye's boss came out to see what all the noise was about, and she told him she had a new driver's license. Confused, he said, "Well, obviously you had one all this time." She told him she did not. He said, "You mean you've been coming in here on this military base and driving and you didn't have a driver's license?" Raye said. And I said, "Right." So he told me, "Well, surely you had a learner's permit." And I said, "No, because I didn't know how to drive." So he asked me, "Who taught me how to drive?" And I told him I taught myself, driving into work for the midnight shift. On the spot, she was promoted to digital computer systems operator and given a raise.
That, gosh. I wanted to, okay, I had so many things I wanted to ask. I have to keep my list here.
Can I add something to what Paige said?
Yeah.
So the issue, it's not that was not the only time that she had to kind of go around the rules a little bit to try to be able to achieve. They didn't. A lot of people. She was really willing to put in whatever she needed to try to learn her job and to look toward the next opportunity that would be a natural progression. And so one of those things was, the computers at that time, took up a huge amount of physical space, but didn't have much operating memory and had to be kept at a certain, cool temperature and couldn't run all the time. So they had to, and so you would have a whole team of people to operate, normally you'd have to have a crew there, and that would require a lot of different hours. So she wanted to be able to get in extra time to kind of hone her craft and keep things going. And she couldn't find people that were willing to put in the extra time with her to help her periodically, unless she's going to be able to help them get overtime. And so eventually she started bringing me and my grandmother to work with her. And so when I joked and said I kind of grew up in Naval Sea Systems Command, I spent a lot of weekends at the Navy, sitting from a child where she taught me how to program computers, doing punch cards, to later, making sure I knew how to use basic technology, no matter what my career would be. She never pushed me to be an engineer, but I thought it was interesting that the people she worked with were like, you have to have people work here with you when you're working. You can't come in by yourself. And she said, I'm not by myself. I've got my family with me. And then she did it so many times that finally they approved getting overtime for other people to come and start working with her. So she kind of forced a change again.
It said that she showed you how to do something with cards.
Yeah, she taught me how to program computer punch cards. They had these in the old days. They had these reel-to-reel computer, and then they would put the information, punch it out on these little punch cards. They were little, little cardboard or whatever they were, paper cards, and that's how the computer would give you information. Then later we got regular printers. They printed out narratives and stuff like that. But she taught me the language BASIC when I was about 4 years old. I think I was.
Crazy.
And I never thought about it as a big deal, but I got a chance to meet all these bigwigs, not only in the Navy in terms of computers and technology generally, but in other military branches as well as the private sector. And I just thought that was really such a great thing to be able to do. I just thought it was neat, and I just never thought that it was unusual. But later on, obviously, even though I'm a social scientist, I'm using technology now in what I do. So,
can you guys tell the story about going to the moon?
David, you take it. Yeah.
I love that one.
Sure. Well, when she was very young, she was in school and she got teased by some of the kids, and because they were talking about what they want to do, and people were just saying this or that. A lot of people. They only talk about or aspire to, unfortunately, the things that they're familiar with, right? And that's what she really was big on, exposing people and urging them to go beyond. And so she told people that, hey, she went and saw a submarine in downtown Little Rock, and she wants to be an engineer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of her, classmates thought she meant to conduct a train, like a moving train,
Mm-hmm.
And they laughed at her. And the ones who actually knew what an engineer was, they were like, well, you're a girl. You can't be an engineer anyway. Mm-hmm. And so she had a teacher, Irma Holiday, and the teacher pulled her aside and said, don't let those kids, break your spirit. Know that, if you really work hard and you try to, really do the best you can to, learn how to play the game and understand and navigate things, playing chess, that opportunities will come your way and you'll be surprised what you can do. And I think she used the phrase, aim for the stars, but at the very least, you'll reach the moon. Well, it turned out later on in my mother's career, she was, a lot of the people that would kind of debug problems, and they meet, things like they knew each other from Navy to Air Force, Army, NASA, across the board, and some private sector folks.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked, they knew each other from all these conferences. They just, that was the group. It's the same thing with any profession. These were all engineers and mathematicians and other types of scientists. And so they were locked in. I said locked in. They were working on a project at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And one of the people that was in that group was contacted, who was with NASA, and said, hey, we're having a problem with one of the robotic arms on a lunar module, a lander. And, can you come back? Can you leave your meeting and come back and help us? Because we really need to get this thing to work. It's a space mission. And so the guy, and I forgot the guy's name. I think we put it in the book. It might have been, was it George Sally? I think that's who I think it was. George Sally said, I'm with people that have just as much skill as me. This is George. And I have a better chance if I just stay right here and we all work together as a team. And so NASA sent whatever data, content, materials that needed immediately there. And they all got on the floor. They were, trying to figure things out. And several hours later, they were able to send some information in. And I remember my mother saying she doesn't know who came up or who found or figured out what, but they worked closely together. And all she knows is that I'm guessing about a day later, that arm came back up because it wasn't able to move. So they saved the mission, basically. And so she reached back and contacted Irma Holiday and thanked her for her encouragement when she was a child, and said, I just want to let you know that I've been to the moon.
I love that. So you said it again. She reached back. Oh,
yes.
This book brought me to tears so many times. And I mean, just talking about her, I don't even know her. I've known her for 4 hours, and I'm just.
I will say this.
Yeah.
When David and his mother reached out to me to see if I would be willing to help them, David is a federal investigator, so he did some research on me, which is terrifying. And then his mother, they said, y'all talk and see if it works out. And I talked to her for 5 minutes, and she started telling me her life story. And I said, well, wait a second, are we doing this? I thought, we were just kind of seeing if we were, this was working out. She said, no, I already made up my mind. I like you, which was terrifying because she just, she did not mess around. She did not mess around. She did not mess around raising David. She did not mess around in her life. Mm-hmm. And I think she encouraged a lot of people, don't mess around. If you have something that you want, go for it.
Do it. Oh my goodness.
Do you want me to show these pictures at some point too?
Oh yeah, let's do that. Okay.
I'm
Just gonna get fancy here.
Okay. Fancy schmancy.
And here we go.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah. Wait here. Let me get rid of stuff.
Okay. And so, I'll put it in this context. Going back to like how Paige and I were talking about how we got together in the first place just then. Mm-hmm. I think it's important for your viewers to know that my mother didn't really think originally people would be interested in a book about her at all. She really didn't. She had spoken to so many different groups over the years, and people would say, you should write something. Like they come up after these church meeting groups, and she's speaking and motivating, whatever. Even in the prison, say, hey, you should write something. And she just kind of like dismissed it because she kept thinking about it as just about her career, and then, finally, she was on Good Morning America in 2017. Mm-hmm. And after getting to meet, Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan, and that's my family there, my wife and child next to Janelle Monáe, mm-hmm. My mother there, obviously in the middle, that guy on the right, that's just me. they said the same thing to her, backstage. Folks that were coming in that worked there, and they were saying, when are you going to write a book? And then she was starting to take it a little more seriously. And then, the literary agent, the Paige and I had contacted me and my mother and basically said, we should think seriously about this, because maybe people aren't saying it the way that will make that it's really putting a buzz, in your ear. It's really not just a book about your career. It's people need to know your story. People need to know why it's important and why you were trying to, and how you were trying to motivate people and still try to motivate people and overcame those odds. And that's something that can help other people. So it's not just about your career. And once the literary agent said that, my mother was like immediately like, well, I guess that makes sense. So we ended up with Paige. But Good Morning America really is responsible for really kind of took it to the next level. This is her when she was on the Harry Connick Jr. show in New York. And this is after.
What did he say to her in that interview?
Well, he said a lot. I can't remember one.
In the book, you mentioned that something like if he doesn't do the show ever again.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man, that man is charming.
Yeah. And it's so funny that at that point, things were really I had a lot of projects going on at work, and I had tried to go. I did take my mother to DC to be recognized as Navy's Hidden Figure. Went with her. She was having travel restrictions because of her health, and they actually sent a limo from New York to take her and my family up to New York, and so she couldn't really fly. For the Harry Connick Jr. show, she was temporarily her doctor, her cardiologist had given her permission to fly, and I couldn't physically go with her at that time. I just couldn't get off. And my intern, who was just a very responsible person, as soon as she found out she could get to go and hang out, she said, I love talking to your mom. She's so interesting. And I've never been in New York. And so she took my mother to New York for that show. And, it's just my mother, I'm just going to say she wasn't shy. She was very upfront. And I called because, I was concerned about how they were doing. They've been traveling all day. And, she was in a wheelchair at that point. And I called and said, well, Nia's, did you all make it to the hotel and everything? She said, oh, yeah, we had a little bit of trouble on one of the connecting flights, just getting off in time. But the hotel is great. And, I said, oh, well, is she okay? Do you think I could talk to her? I said, well, you can talk to her now. We're just sitting around at an outdoor cafe having pina coladas. I was like, oh, my God.
She once told me, I was trying to coordinate something with her. I said, well, David said. She said, David thinks he's my father.
Well, it's obvious, I guess, to all your viewers right now, that, mother always felt that she was necessary to get as much. She wasn't trying to check boxes. And I think that's important to say. She wasn't just trying to say, hey, I did this, I did this, I did that. She literally wanted to get the strongest skill set that she could. You know what I mean? And that's why she was involved in so many different organizations, and you can see all of them just in her yearbook picture right there.
She's beautiful too.
And thank you. I think it's important to know that obviously designing the very first rough draft of a ship, and what a process that was, as Paige mentioned, 2 years, and doing it in 18 hours and 26 minutes using a computer, that really kind of launched her career. But it's important to know that she was also the very first woman to become a program manager of ships. That's a position in the history of the U.S. Navy. And so her designation, she was in charge of a program. She was PMS for a group called 309. And so at one point, she was responsible for purchasing all computers for the Navy. And she had 5 field activities around the country. From the East Coast to the West Coast, all the way out to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii as well. And so my point is that she was always trying to, do, and it turned out that the irony is, even though segregation, the discrimination of not her being able to attend the engineering program she wanted to, and having to take something else on, she still took as many math and science classes as she could.
Mhm.
Right. And so with her business degree, as she rose in the ranks as an engineer, her budgeting her business background helped her with things like budgeting, management, things like that really helped propel her even faster to be able to manage. Because some people they thought they were putting her in that position, she was going to fail.
Well, that's so ahead of the time, because now really to make it, you need an engineering and an business degree. Like that's what you do now. And she was ahead of it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that, she recognized the importance of like I mentioned, with skill set and building. Here's an example of a poster of her in 1985 when she was speaking for Federal Women's Week. And I believe this was also with Dr. Dorothy Wright from the National Council for Negro Women. It's a long time ago. Here's a picture of her at the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. She was the first woman, I think, on their board, but she was also the first woman to be on the board of directors and an officer for the Numerical Control Society. You think of numerical control as the everything that's behind, the cell phones today, and using robotics to build cars and TVs and all the other things. Our computers, the ones that we're using right now to do this show. She was with those folks, and she was the first woman to serve on their board and did rise up into the leadership. Here's a picture of one of her ships. Wow. The LHA #1, and that's a test blast in the background. That was 1973. At that time, she was married. She had married, and that didn't last. But it was her name was Parat at the time. Here's a picture of the USS Eisenhower. And it's important to mention to your viewers that, when she would design a rough draft of a ship, each one of those projects was really about basically designing the mold, if you will, and then based on that mold, they could build duplicates, so she would design the first draft of a ship for a class of ships, right? And some of her ships are still at sea today.
Yeah, you said that in Turkey and I don't remember.
Yemen.
That was cool.
Yeah, and so the last ship that she worked on was the Seawolf, which was a nuclear sub. And she was really proud of that because technology had changed a lot, and there's a lot of logistics like you mentioned earlier about how do when they used to do the paper drafting of ships, that you had to factor in, well, if somebody wants to change this or change that, then you have to really figure out how does it all still fit together? How do you still make it work and it doesn't fall apart? And at that point, it wasn't a matter with the nuclear subs. It wasn't a matter of how long they can go, because they could travel the Earth, believe she said 13 times without having to come out. The problem was that they need more supplies. They need, and that brings me to, when the Navy recognized her and I'll show that picture now. Let me come back to that one.
Okay.
For that. The Navy recognized her in 2017 as well, as their hidden figure. And so that's when, she went to DC. I went with her on that trip, and she went to 2 different ceremonies to honor her. One was at the Naval Sea Systems Command. And then the other one was at Dahlgren, Virginia. And I'll show you this one. Actually, that's Naval Sea Systems Command. And she spoke to an auditorium of people that wanted to come and learn about this person that it was from them. I mean, she grew up. Everything she did was in the Navy. That she had one employer for 33 and a half years, right? Which is kind of rare nowadays. And so she got a chance to speak to that group. They did honor her. She let them know the struggles that she had back then too. And unfortunately found out afterward that there are a lot of women that are still dealing with a lot of struggles, What you see in the background of the image is at her retirement ceremony, she was given that flag that you see that's in the box and a certificate of authenticity from the architect of the Capitol to signify that it had been flown over the U.S. Capitol in her honor. And so she obviously has lots of, accolades, but I think that flag was probably the most significant of them. And I will say one more thing. Go ahead.
Oh, that picture of her like drowning in achievement. I saw that picture on the internet. I just loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I will say that the second group that we visited for the Navy, and this is going to be a really funny one for your viewers. I think they're going to love it. So the other facility was in Dahlgren, Virginia. And so it's not a secret facility. It's just what they do there we can't go into, And so she got a chance to meet with the folks there. And it's not just the Navy that is there. There's other groups that are there too at that facility. And the person that you see sitting next to my mother is the captain who was in charge of the Navy's portion of the facility. And they do a lot of research and things like that there and other things. And so it's customary in terms of naval protocol that if you are of a certain rank and you come to visit a facility, that is for the ranking officer to sit down for coffee with you. And you see they're actually honoring that tradition because my mother's civilian, even though she's a civilian, she wasn't a military person. She was a civilian in the Navy, but her position in the Navy as a program manager of ships was the equivalent of a captain in the U.S. Navy. Wow. And so they gave her that honor. And then what's interesting is they gave us a tour, and one of the places they took us, and we weren't allowed to carry any photographic or recording equipment or anything like that in with us. We just got to see this and use our brain to remember it, was one of the labs. And they showed her how they were using technology that was initially talked about 40 some years ago and theorized to use like tubs of metal powder to use 3D printers to be able to make ship parts on the fly, at sea. And the impact of that is just, tremendous because it makes it so the ships don't have to come back as often, right? You still have to worry about food and things like that. But if you're not having to worry about how many of this part to carry, that part to carry, you can make them all as you go. Just, that changes the game. And I had not seen my mother that excited and happy and giddy and just couldn't believe it. And she was in there, and to see these young scientists, like, I didn't know who this person was. They're like whispering and stuff, and they're kind of, who is she? And blah, 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 kind of thing. Man, by the way, we can't take a picture together, But
we really step outside and do it at least, but oh my goodness.
And this is her with the Navy with some of her sorority sisters, so she had a chance to see that bond. And, my mother was a real person. She didn't just focus on work. She was, very active, and she was just a person. She really loved doing service. We've talked about, I guess, at end now, she loved giving back. And so this is her with the FBI. This is her in the center where she was she was honored by the FBI. That's the Little Rock field office, and some of the staff and some of the other speakers were there, and I got a chance to go. And the person sitting on the right, as you're looking at the photo, to the right of my mother is the special agent in charge. And we're just in the lobby there and the foyer. And it was great, and through a story that I won't get into because it's a lot longer, it has to do with the FBI Citizens Academy. There's actually a photo of her that's on the walls permanently put, at least until they get rid of all the other photos, because she's listed even though she wasn't, I was part of the graduating class of the Citizens Academy in 2007, but I couldn't go to the graduation, and they love my mother so much. They put that she stood in for the photo because I was out of the country. And she told me she thought they were going to Photoshop her out. And I went to visit for another thing a few years later, and I walked down the hall. I said, "Wait a minute, that's my mother in the fuck. What's going on?"
I love that.
Here's her talking to a group of kids, and this is in Washington, D.C. after she had been traveling for 2 days by train.
Wow.
And she still sat down with these kids in the lobby of the hotel to inspire them, right? This is her in Little Rock talking to folks at one of her local schools. This is her at the Arkansas Science Olympiad. That's a day-long series of experiments, basically, dealing with all types of science projects that middle schoolers and high schoolers do. And one of the professors at the university I'm at is on that board, and he kind of runs that show, and it involves high schools and middle schools all over the state of Arkansas. And the Science Olympiad is a national endeavor, not just Arkansas. Sorry, dog.
Ethan has something to say.
That's right.
He usually does.
That's right. And so they created the Raye Montague trophy to give out every year for top prize. And so they give one to the middle schoolers and one to the high school. I sit on their board now to, as part of that. We have, it's obviously during COVID, it's been more difficult, but that's a permanent fixture in what they want to do. So you see the photo of her at the very first time she got a chance to be there for the awarding of the first, and make remarks to the children there. And this is her in DC. She loved everyone she met. This is one of the people that would help folks with their bags. And believe it or not, he came to, when we brought my mother's body up for burial in Maryland, he came to the graveside service to honor her. And this is her traveling. This is her in Venice. Oh. And then this is her here in Little Rock when she was inducted into the Black Hall of Fame. This is our family.
Wow.
I will say something about Raye. When she touched a lot of lives, as obviously you can see. And after her passing, David has kind of grabbed the baton for her. He's accepted plenty of awards on her behalf. He's spoken to plenty of groups about the amazing feats, and the amazing life his mother lived. And I keep thinking about this one time. I referenced my trip out to Little Rock in July 2019. He was reading the Julia Finley Mosca book, The Girl with a Mind for Math, about his mother, to this group of little kids who were at a STEM camp on his campus. And it was really, really fun. He connected really well with these kids, as his mother did. And then he and I went off to a meeting, came back to his office, and there were all these little thank you notes that these kids did. There were caricatures of David talking to these little kids and all these things like, "Your mom sounds so cool," and all that kind of stuff. But then there was this one little girl, Charlotte, who wrote him a letter. And I always think about this because it was still like very, she hadn't been gone a year by that point. And she thanked him for coming to speak to them. "Your mom sounds amazing, and you are too." It takes guts to show up and do this like so soon after your mom passed away. And honestly, throughout this whole entire process, David has been brave and generous, and he has shown up, and he has been a credit to his mother. And the work. Yeah, and the work. And I'm just really grateful to have been a part of this book and to have helped them tell the story. Her voice did mean something. It absolutely did. And I'm glad that it's being heard. I'm really glad it's being heard.
Oh my goodness. I don't think I've ever cried so much in an interview.
The funny part though is, this is funny. She died laughing. I just couldn't believe it. And she would just roll over right now. I'm sure she's looking at it now. She used to always say, "Can you believe it? Can you believe it?"
Yes, she did.
I still have people that are come to contact me even during this pandemic that have contacted me recently even. I have one that was like 2.5 weeks ago. It said, hey, I was working with your mother. I was a CNA at the assisted living facility that she ended up moving to when her health got to that point and she couldn't live with us anymore. And I heard her talking to a lot of people. I went in and just sat and talked to her for a while, and she told me I have to go to school. Well, I got my associates since then, and now I'm ready to talk to you about how to come to get my, BSN, my nursing degree, and achieve that goal. And I'm like, I can't tell you how many people have told me I ran into her, I saw her speak, and I'm here. I need, just connect me with somebody. Do something, please.
She's like this amazing unicorn. I swear, she's touched so many lives, and throughout the course of talking to people about her, after we got this book going, you have people who used to date her who said if we had gotten married, I probably would have become a doctor. She was the mother I never had. You
mentioned that times in the book.
Just like all this kind of stuff, and her reach is incredible. Just her life and her heart. She was really a tremendous person. You don't have to like the people you write about. You don't have to.
It helps.
It helps, but you absolutely do not have to like the people you write about. And I liked her. I love David and his family. They've been very good to me, and I'm just really grateful to know them.
Yeah. Well, we're about to wrap up. Okay. If anybody is going to take anything away from this book, what do you want them to take away from it?
Oh boy. There's
things to choose.
I have come to look at this as sort of a survival manual. Like lives, the study of human lives have always been really fascinating to me. What makes people tick, what they're interested in, what obstacles they've overcome. And I think we can learn a lot from each other if we listen to each other and, share these common points. This showed a lot about what she was made of and kind of what it took for her to overcome things. If she can do it, we can all do it.
Yeah. What about you, David?
Just to piggyback on most, obviously Paige said, but in addition that, never to feel like, everything that is going to be an option for you down the road. And that's why it's so important to really prepare yourself to be ready for what comes down the road that you don't know about right now, whether it's with technology or culture or whatever it might be. You need, when that door of opportunity opens, you need to be ready to go. And then once you do it, make sure that you're reaching back and opening doors for other people as well. If not, then there's no point in you, because she used to very clearly say her legacy is not what she did in her career. Her legacy is what she's able to do to leave the world a better place than when she arrived, and inspiring other people to do the same thing.
Well, she did. My goodness. Okay. We have copies of the Overnight Code in stock. Paige lives locally, so she said she'd come in and sign them, and David's going to send us some book plates. This has been an absolute pleasure. I am going to force everybody who comes into the store to read this book. If you shop at our store, expect me to say you have to read this book. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Absolute pleasure. We have copies in stock. You can buy them on our website. You can come in person. You don't have to support Read It Again. We would like you to support Read It Again. Just make sure that you buy your copy of the Overnight Code at your local independent bookstore.
Yeah. These are such, independent bookstores are so important to me. They're so important to communities, and let's support them.
Yeah. Dave, do you have an indie bookstore by you that you like?
Pyramid Books and Framing is a really good one. We're actually going to do an event with them and the links of Little Rock, where my mother was a platinum member. She'd been there many, many years. they're gonna partner to do something. I forgot which date it is, but I think it's in March.
It's in March. Yeah, I don't know what date it is either, but it's in March. We're trying to keep up with dates.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness! I bet. Oh, I hope they book the heck out of you guys. Just gotta do it. Gotta do the work.
Gotta do the work. Exactly.
Gotta do the work. Paige, I know you shop at our store.
I do.
Okay, guys.
But we definitely, and I'll just say that we definitely, even in the men's group I belong to, we also, just like Paige said, we purchased copies of the Obama book, and we went through our independent book pyramid to buy those copies and distribute.
Oh, Obama's book got us through Christmas.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of indies said that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David, next time you're in town when there's not COVID to visit Morehouse, come visit us, please.
Definitely.
Yes. Oh, okay, guys.
Well, me too, by the way.
No, you can just come visit us. But when COVID's over, because we want you to be safe.
Visit me too, though.
Okay. And the varsity.
You can visit Paige too, but read it again is more important.
I want to take the dog from the varsity.
What do you have? What do you have? What do you have? Dog over here. So, okay, guys. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.